Welcome to Forged in the Fires podcast with Fireman Rob. Being a fireman, father, veteran, husband, world record holder, and Ironman, he brings stories of experience to impact your life while challenging you to live it. What do you want from your life? Why do you want it? Are you willing to go through the challenges to get there? If you have the courage to take that first step, let this podcast be the catalyst to start your fire while you bring the resilience to make it continue to burn. Our lives are made up of moments called right nows. So let's get started. Forged in the Fires podcast with your host, Fireman Rob, begins now.
Welcome back to Forged in the Fires podcast. I'm your host, Rob Verhelst, better known as Fireman Rob. I've got a great guest today. He has the name that when you hear Rocky, you think of running up the steps and fighting Ivan Drago. But this gentleman has probably even more leadership qualities than Rocky does. It's great to have you on the show today, Rocky. Thanks so much for being here.
Well, Fireman Rob, it's a pleasure to be here. And it's interesting, with a name like Rocky, you get a lot of different looks. In fact, during my career at UPS, I moved around quite a bit. And I was living in Des Moines, Iowa, great city. Loved living there. And you can imagine when I introduced myself as Rocky Romanella, the first question I got asked by everybody was, "Hey, are you in a witness protection program?" So the name conjures up some different things to different people, but great place to live. I know you're a Midwestern guy yourself, and I love living in Iowa, great family place. But it was funny to see people's faces like, is that your real name? Yeah, it is. I mean, it's Rocco technically, but yeah, it's real.
And I love it. I go on to 360managementservices.com. It's 360managementservices.com. And I see right there, rock your audience. You can't get it better. Your parents knew exactly what they needed to do for you.
Well, I don't think my mother would say that. She'd say I had no choice in that Italian family we grew up in. I had no choice but the name of Rocco. But in fact, we had. So I'm Rocco. My son is Rocco. And then yesterday we had his first boy, and he named him Rocco. So we have Big Rock, Little Rock, and Kid Rock. So we're set to go here.
You're gonna have a great band.
I know, right? Yeah. Well, enough about me, my friend. Let's talk about you and your audience.
Oh, I love it. Hey, well, it's fun to find the person behind the greatness, because you had over a 40-year career of boots on the ground leadership from 36 years at UPS, starting as a part-time loader and unloader. I did that job for a little while. That is a difficult job, but you moved your way all the way up to president and general manager of UPS Supply Chain Solutions. Tell me that transgression, because you go from working, front line, so you understand the philosophy of what it takes to have leadership to be able to make those individuals want to work or enjoy work. What is that brought you to that pinnacle from starting at the scratch, in essence?
Well, thanks for asking, Rob. So, it started out, I went to college, ironically, to be a high school history teacher and a baseball coach. And so my dad, rest his soul, said, "Hey, one of my kids is going to college. It's you, but we got no money." So UPS gave me the opportunity to work my way through college, as I'm sure you did as well with that part-time job. But one of the things that I noticed is that the leaders inside that organization, whether they were part-time or full-time, were the people who could get their people to connect the dots and see, where we were going and we're training and developing people. And so for me, I never gave up my teaching or coaching passion. I just went from the classroom in a traditional setting to a business setting. And so the essence of being that teacher or being that coach never left me. My dad, rest his soul, told me two things when I got the job. The first thing he told me is, live with me my whole life, and it's kind of like the backbone of everything I do. He said to me, "Hey, whatever they ask you to do, say yes and thank you, and then learn your job and learn some more. The day you think you understand it or you're the best at what you can do is the day that the world's passing you by." So I never forgot those two things. And so UPS had this promotion from within policy. And as they tapped me on the shoulder for different responsibilities, I remember looking at them. We purchased mailboxes, et cetera. And I got a call to come to the corporate office, and the CEO at the time, Jim Kelly, said, "Hey, we want you to, run this new acquired business unit." And I'm looking at it, "Jim, you got to have somebody smarter than me in this organization to do this." "Really?" And he looked at me and he said, "No, we think you're the right person for it." And what I learned that day stuck with me forever. And that's that as a leader, there are times that you have to believe in your people until they're ready to believe in themselves. And think about it
Sure.
think about in in the fire world you're in. Think about how that teamwork's so important. And you get that person that just came out of the academy, and you're believing in them until they're ready to believe in themselves, right? They may not have the
Right.
confidence yet or the skill, but you bridge that gap for them. To me, that was such a valuable lesson. The same way as becoming a UPS driver and loading trailers was such a valuable lesson for me that, hey, every time you take a new job, the first thing you do is not send out orders or not, try to change things. The first thing you do is get down there in the trenches and find out what people do. Take the time to learn the job. I mean, so the first thing I did is when they gave me mailbox, et cetera, I put an apron on and worked a day in the store. What
It's
really
amazing.
happens here? So I think that those were the lessons I learned. And then, we rebranded to the UPS store, met some wonderful entrepreneurs in that assignment. And what I really learned is no one's more all in than an entrepreneur. No one's more all in than a small business owner. Look, in a big company, you have P&L responsibilities. No one has, a more focused, responsibility than a small business owner. Think about it, Rob. They hit the
Right.
cash register at night. The door open, the drawer open. They pay their people. They pay their vendors. What's left is what they take home for their families. And I gained such great respect for that small business owner. And I looked and I said, I don't know if I could do this. I mean, I grew up with a company, that I think frankly had your back, right? It was a company. You knew that
Right.
they were financially solid, but small business owners. So for me, great respect. I think they're the backbone of our economy and backbone of our country. And you gotta love the small business owner. There's just tremendous energy and enthusiasm. Then we made about over 20 acquisitions, built UPS Supply Chain Solutions, ran this side of the world for UPS, retired at 55, 36 years, really had some wonderful opportunities inside UPS, and then was a CEO of a telecom company. We built cell towers, upgraded cell towers, had a sale there, and then started my own business. So what's the number one thing? I fail at retirement. I can't do
You
this.
fail at retirement.
Oh yeah, we should have seen the first day I come. I said to Debbie, I go, hey, so what are we doing today? She goes, I don't know what you're doing. I haven't seen you in a while. You're not following me around the food store, so figure out what you're gonna do. Or I'd say to her, hey, hon, what about this? And she goes, hey, I didn't apply for your assistant's job, so you better figure out what you're gonna do here pretty quick here. So I said, maybe I'll get another job, or maybe I'll start my own company.
I love it. I love it. It's interesting when you talked about that whole transgression of, how you went and worked at that, a mailbox, et cetera, store. And, you starting at that beginning is one of the things that you say is remember who you are, but move forward with a vision. Tell me more about what you mean by that, because that really encompasses what you did as your life.
Well, I think it's so important. So, my dad spent a lot of time instilling in me these values and these ethics. And I remember him saying to me one time, and I'm kind of, think about him saying this to me in Italian, but he basically said to me, hey, listen, he says, it's what you do when no one's watching that counts, right? And I looked at him, I said, hey, Dad, you're ruining the best part of it. Nobody's watching. You know what I mean? And he looked at me and he had that smile, rest his soul. And he said to me, he said, there's always two people watching, the man upstairs, but the person looking in the mirror. And you got to look in the mirror every single day. And you may not achieve the things you want to achieve, and you may not do all the things that you had hoped to do, but you have to look in the mirror and believe you did it the right way. And so that's what I mean when I say that. Don't ever forget who you are. I mean, look, at the end of the day, I had a wonderful career, but today I have the greatest title I've ever had in my whole life, Grandpa. So don't forget
Right.
who you are, right? And we're all good people trying to do the best job we have. I said when I was CEO, I'm the Chief Enthusiasm Officer. You don't need me. It's like, you running a battalion of firefighters. They don't need you over managing them when they know how to do their job. What they need is you giving them the authority that goes with the responsibility. And that's what I mean. Small business owners sometimes run into that where, no one's, think about what's their strength. Nobody knows their business better than they do. No one's more committed than they are. No one cares more than they do about the business. What's their weakness? No one cares more than they do about the business. No one's more invested than they are. Right? So sometimes you have to take that step back. Don't forget who you are. You're a good person doing the best job you can, trying to build your business. And so now you need to have that vision. So where's this business going to go? If I hire that next person, how do I train them properly? How do I give them the authority that goes with the responsibilities? So don't lose sight of who you are. we're all good people trying to do the best job we have. We may have different jobs. There are no easy jobs in this world. And I think that's what's so
Right.
important.
And you hit it on the head when you were talking about you're the chief enthusiasm officer, because one of your favorite phrases is hard work without enthusiasm is just hard work.
It gets old too. It gets old.
It's so
too,
true
right?
because yeah, and that's I think a lot of people in today's society, as well as in the fire service or whether you're in sales, understand that you have to have that common vision. And I know one of the things that you talk about is having that unified vision to be able to move forward. How did you do that with when you're in that position of being a president or general manager of this huge area of UPS supply chain solutions? How do you make sure to try to unify the numerous visions to actually align with UPS?
I think the first thing was you have to take the time to clearly understand what that vision is. That you're being asked to either execute or the vision you've developed yourself to execute on. And I think it's important to really understand that. I developed this, what I call this balanced leadership process. And it came about because as we were sitting in meetings or we were having discussions, I always wanted to make sure that the key constituents were represented. And for me, there's customers, people, and share owners and stakeholders. And so, for example, if we were sitting at a meeting and someone brought forth a new product and they would say to me, and they would articulate how they would do it. Of course, if they're salespeople, they're going to come with like 700-page piece of paper, PowerPoint presentation. You got the whole. All right, so I got it. I got the product.
Make sure there's coffee on.
And then while we're doing it, now you got stuff coming in, coming out. When they do the animation, you really know they're trying to oversell you, right? Like, all right, got that. And of course, the CFO, he or she's banging on the calculator, and why we can make money at that price point. And then I would always ask the question, well, how about our people? Because at that moment, our people weren't represented. And I think a lot of times it's on an organization when you're looking, you'll have a strategy deck or you'll have, a new idea that's coming forth. The customer is represented most times, share owner stakeholders are from a profitability represented, but the people weren't represented. Do they understand why we're doing this? Do they understand why this is important? Do they understand what role they play? Do they understand how to handle a service disconnect? And so I started to feel like in many cases, our people weren't always represented at the table. And so as long as I knew the customers were represented properly and I knew the share owner stakeholders were represented, they didn't need me to be at the table asking those key questions because they were well represented. Now I had to make sure our people were represented. And so when you think about strategies and you think about how organizations change and try to reposition themselves based on events that are taking place, you really need to make sure that all three constituents are represented. But most times, Rob, it's the people who don't really have that seat at the table. People just assume, well, they'll do it. They understand it's a good thing to do, or they believe it's the right thing to do. They have faith in our company. That's all well and good, but it's also nice for them to know that you took the time. So for me, it was always about communication. It was always about them understanding, getting out there, walking the talk. I used to tell people all the time, I remember one time there was a conversation about potentially someone had asked me, hey, I think you'd be great on Undercover Boss. People were talking to me about it. And I'm like, no, nobody. First of all, nobody wants a short little Italian that looks like Super Mario Brothers. Nobody wants that guy on Undercover Boss. I said, but the real reason why I would never do it is because it would break my heart that nobody knew who you were. And why would you want that? Don't you want to be cheered? Everybody knows your name. Right. So, and to your question, I mean, when you manage a large geographic organization or a large number of people, not everybody knows you intimately or knows you as well as you would like them to. But the fact that you're walking around and you're approachable, it means so much to people because they realize that, your span of control is so large, but you took the time to come out. You took the time to talk to people. You say good morning to people. You say hello to people. I think that's what sets the tone. So it's your ability to communicate on a timely and effective basis, as well as being approachable. And you set that tone. That's you personally. I mean, you can write all you want about being approachable, but if you've never left your office, you're probably not approachable, right?
Yeah. Open door policy with a closed door.
Well, you know why people never leave their office. There's no problems in there. Right? Unless the air conditioner is broken or the coffee machine is not working. I mean, you got no problems in there. You got to leave. You got to get out of the office for crying out loud, right?
And it's interesting. Like I transitioned from that question to a story that I heard that you told about as a child. You used to take vacations to the Hershey factory, and tell us more about the revelation that that event in your life actually changed to you leading differently when you were
So
actually
as a
at your
kid
job.
growing up, that was our big vacation. I grew up in Jersey, and so the Hershey factory was a couple hours away, and so we would go to Hershey, Pennsylvania. And in those days, you actually visited the Hershey factory. You actually saw them making the chocolate. It was kind of like, think about the factory under glass. And it was such as a kid, what a
Yeah,
great deal. I mean, they were making chocolate all over the place, and it was just great. I mean, oh man,
it's a great day.
you can still remember it, and the smells and those kinds of things. And so for me, it was the joy of seeing them making chocolate. As an adult, I'm walking around, or as a business person, I'm walking around my facility in Chicago at the time, and I stopped dead in my tracks. And the Hershey, the whole Hershey experience came to life for me. It was kind of my aha moment, I call it, where I looked around and I thought to myself, wow, if my customers walked in here at any time, would they ever ship a package again? And I thought to myself, I got to run a Hershey factory. I got to be under glass. I got to run a place that my customers can come in and visit at any time, and they would be proud of how we're handling their packages. And that was my aha moment. And if you think about it in a restaurant, how often, right, Rob Putman says, you don't ever walk through the kitchen. Well, in my Hershey factory, we'd walk you through the kitchen, and we'd watch it. We want you to see how we make the sausage. We want you to see how clean the kitchen is. I think now, post COVID-19, you probably got to really do that now to make people feel safe and secure and those kinds of things.
Exactly.
So I think that for me, the Hershey factory and the Hershey story was that aha moment that, I have to run that type of facility or that kind of operation where people can come in at any time and know that I was taking care of their goods and services. And so from that moment forward, I challenge all my people all the time in my care that, hey, you know what? Run your Hershey factory. Could a customer walk in here at any time? We used to be on conference calls, and I'm sure your listeners are on calls all the time at work and stuff like that. And every now and then I'd stop the call,
Right.
and I'd say, now let me ask you a question. If one of our customers came in and listened to this call, you think they'd ever use us again? I mean, we're fighting. I mean, think about how this sounds. I mean, can we kind of get ourselves together here? And that's what you have to think about.
Yeah.
What does the customer think? What does the customer think's happening inside our operation, no matter what it is, whether it's a small business, whether it's a major corporation, inside your firehouse? Do they think that we're running around here doing this, and this versus what they really think is happening? So I think that that's what you're trying to bridge that gap. And you challenge your people in a positive way to kind of build their own Hershey factory. Think about when you get a contractor and you say, hey, do you have a referral? Oh yeah, can you call Joe Scafone Thursday at 2:00? Well, wait a second.
Of course you'd say Joe Scafone.
I can only call one person at 2:00 in the afternoon. I'm a little bit concerned. Well, give me the last 5 customers you did business with? Oh no, call this guy at 2:00. Of course you're a guy named Rocky from Jersey. Call my guy Joe at 2:00. Call my guy Joe at 2:00. That's the only guy you can talk to. So I think you want that to be, hey, here's the last 5 people I did. Call any one of them. And you know what? I think you'll see that, we're people of our word and we do the best we can in executing on what we told you we were going to do.
Right. And you talked about your dad telling you that, it's what you do when no one else is watching that counts. And that really speaks volumes to what you're talking about, having that confidence in your people, in your process, in your facility, to have those unannounced visits.
I think the other thing it does is I think sometimes what we forget is that the brand is represented by that frontline person that's closest to your customer. I mean, the brand, right? And that's what's so important.
So true.
And those are the things that people do when no one's watching. It's that person who helps somebody when no one's watching, and I think that that's what's so important because they're living your brand promise. They're executing your brand promise. And I tell people all the time, I get the opportunity, which is a lot of fun for me, to address juniors and seniors in college and high school, and they're talking about their careers and starting their careers or what school to go to, what major maybe to take. And I always tell them that, companies have brands, and if if you yell out dilly dilly, everybody knows what you're talking about, But I say, but that's a brand, right? And that brand represents
Yep.
something. Well, what's your
Right.
brand as a person? What does your brand represent as a person? And it's what you do when no one's watching that really either enhances your brand, because now people, because as you know, word of mouth is still the best advertisement. It's people talking about, hey, I got this, I had this interaction with so and so, or I had this, with this brand, and it's no different than a brand. If you break your brand promise, it's hard. It's hard for you to get that back. You think of those companies that had their issues, Wells Fargo, and some of those companies that had their share of problems. They were a 150-year-old company that may take 2 generations to get back to where they once were from a brand, and the way their brand suffered from that. Well, it's the same with us as people. If I'm a leader or I'm a person, and I violate my brand promise, I may lose my credibility with those individuals for a long time afterwards. So I think that's so important. And those things tend to happen when no one's watching, and they look backwards and they say, I can't believe that's how you would handle that. Or, it's like, someone in your care in the firehouse needs a day off because someone in their family's sick, and you choose, you can't do it. Well,
Right.
that's what they're going to remember. The one time I needed that day off. Now, let's say down the road, you say to them, hey, why don't you take a day off? They look at you like, well, I needed it 2 weeks ago, not today. And they remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
thanks,
but
right.
thanks
So I
so.
think that's so important.
Right.
It's what you do in those moments that really define your character, defines your brand, and it defines your brand promise.
I love that philosophy, and that really lends itself into the book that you wrote. That is, I wish it was actually you in that little car. If anybody wants to check it out, they can go to um, TightenTheLugnuts.com. You can see the caricature of this guy in this little vehicle going across. It would have been much better with you in there, Rocky. Tell me more about this book. It's Tighten the Lug Nuts, The Principles of Balanced Leadership.
Well, it's
Where
funny.
did this come from?
I believe in this concept of legacy being an important part of who you are as a person, and what is your legacy. So for me, this concept of legacy is: do I leave things a little better than I found them? Are people better because of their time with me, or are customers better because of their interaction with our company? Are the shareholder stakeholders, do they feel better about the fact that we're running the organization on their behalf? And so for me, it's about this legacy. And so I felt like I had this opportunity through a wonderful career to really learn from some wonderful people and hopefully mentor some people along the way myself. And so for me, the book was my opportunity to maybe leave things a little better than I found them, from the lessons I learned and the people I interacted with. Gave me a chance to recognize my dad for the things he taught me as a child, and frankly, my wife, who's been such a huge influence in my adult career and my business career. So the book gave me the chance to do that. As you can tell, I love to tell a lot of stories. So there's a lot of stories in the book, and each chapter sort of kind of can stand on its own from a lesson, but also it kind of is a whole story of my career. Now, the main character is a gentleman, as you know, by the name of Joe Scafone. And Joe was created some years ago because I would sit in a meeting, and Rob, you'd bring an idea, and I would, I never liked that feeling of saying to you, oh, that's a good idea, Rob, but what if you looked at this, or what if you did that? And I always felt like that but word always kind of closed conversation or took you back a little bit, like, oh, maybe you didn't think it's a good idea, or maybe I didn't do all my homework. And I never liked that feeling. So I created this character, frankly, Joe Scafone. I'd say to him, oh, that's a good idea, but you think Joe Scafone thinks that's a good idea? You think Joe would do it a little different? And you'd laugh. And then you'd say, yeah, I gotta take a look at it. So it was my way of challenging you not to stop at the first right answer and maybe look past that first right answer, but not in a way that made you feel like I didn't think you had a good idea, or I wasn't pleased with the fact that you were bringing these ideas forward. So Joe helped me do that. So Joe was that person that allowed me to challenge you without making you feel bad, and challenge you not to stop. Because I think one of the key things you do as a leader is you challenge your people not to stop at the first right answer, and that's how you look past it's the right answer. But if you can look past it, maybe you can find some unintended consequences. Maybe you can go deeper and wider. So Joe became, a good friend and a person with me all the time. In fact, people would come to meetings and say to me, "Hey, I covered this with Joe already. Joe thinks it's a great idea." I'm like, all right, maybe I can take a look at it with you. And so each of the, yeah, what would Joe do?
What
right?
would Joe do?
With Joe. And so So that's, so when I wrote the book, I never wanted to write a book saying, well, I think you could do this, or maybe you should look at that. It was always Joe, narrating. So it took the I out of there completely, and it became a person that could help, maybe give you a kind of tilt of the head a little bit or have an aha moment along the way. The title of the book comes from a story in a book. I won't go through the whole story, but basically when the lug nuts are loose on a vehicle, they're important. You can quickly tighten those and be fine, but you get distracted and something takes your mind off of it or something else happens and you don't tighten the lug nuts at that moment. At that moment, they're important. But if you don't tighten the lug nuts, they become urgent, and people can only handle so many urgent things. So don't allow important things to become urgent.
Right.
Tighten the lug nuts.
I love it. I love it. And, when you were talking about, when I read an article about this book and you were talking about, it's not just a leadership book. It's the simple acts of kindness that make a difference in people's lives. That's such a powerful statement because it's so true nowadays. And it's so true even going into the future is those simple little things, those simple acts of kindness create that power to understand your role more, to actually move forward and have that freedom to accept responsibilities that you may not have accepted before. How powerful was that for you to write that, those concepts? Because it's as a father, I know I want to be able to teach my kids those concepts, but how important was it for you to be able to write those concepts in this book?
See, for me, that was what the book was all about. The book was about leadership. We're all leaders at one time or another. It's not a title of CEO or manager or supervisor. We're all leaders at one time or another. And my example of that, Rob, would be, if I'm doing a keynote speech, which I have the opportunity to do quite often, and I'm in a room with 300, 400 people, and I said, hey, who's your state representative or who is the head of your board of ed? Most people couldn't answer that question. But if I asked the question, hey, who's the leader that made a difference in your life? Everybody stopped, tossed their head. 5th grade, Mrs. So-and-so. 4th grade, Mr. So-and-so. So by that extension, teachers are some of the greatest leaders because they make a difference in people's lives. They leave a legacy. And so all of us have that opportunity. Even individual contributors in an organization, they'll say, well, I'm not a leader. Well, people go to you and ask you, how do you do this? Or how'd you do that? Or how do you set up this in a machine shop? How do you set this up? Well, by that extension, you're a leader. And so for me, this concept of leadership is we're all leaders at one time or another as, Little League coaches or cheerleading coaches, whatever. We're influencing people. And so I think it starts with your values, your ethics, and your ability to have those simple acts of kindness, to be generous with your time, to understand that it's never about you as a leader. It's always about your people. It's always about the people in your care. And that's what I think that's what changes, right? How many times have we worked for a person or we've been, in an organization where the person's sitting there saying, you don't know how difficult I got it. You don't know what it's like to be me. And you're thinking to yourself, really? I mean, you're getting paid the big job.
Yep.
By the way, you asked for the job. It wasn't like they, drug you into this job. You couldn't wait to get the job and tell everybody, hey, it's got promoted. Can't believe it, Well, yeah, by the way, we couldn't believe it either, when they promoted you. But I think that when you make it about yourself, you really start to lose your people and you lose your focus. You make it about yourself, and it should never be about you. It should always be about the people in your care or the people that you're interacting with. And I think, so for me, I didn't want to write a book about, success or how to become this or how to become that. I wanted to write a book that was about leadership that really talked about how to become the best person you can be. And that's what's important. It didn't matter the title I got to or the legacy, the level I got to. And it mattered, was I true to myself? Did I treat people with dignity and respect? It doesn't mean I was perfect. It doesn't mean I made all the right decisions. It doesn't mean there's somebody out there listening that says, I worked for that guy. I don't know if I liked him as much as he thought I did. Well, when you're managing large numbers of people, those things are going to happen. But but if they look at you and say, look, maybe it wasn't the best relationship, but I really do think he did it. His intentions were good. And so I think that that's what's important. It's, as I was saying before, I get the opportunity to speak to juniors and seniors in both high school and college, or people, in organizations that are maybe starting out in their careers, and they'll talk a little bit about, what are some of your thoughts, or Do you have any, do you have any best practices? And for me, it always comes down to this. I tell people all the time, and even if you're in the middle of your career, I always tell them, think of the word you want someone to use to describe you at the end of your career. Think of the word you want to, and then
That's great.
It's funny when you're depending. Could be firefighters coming out of the academy. What's the word you want someone to use to describe you at the end of your career? Could be small business owners. Starting their businesses. That's exactly right.
It's
and then
universal.
What happens is for me, the word was thoughtful. I wanted to be considered a thoughtful leader. And some people it's ethical. Some people it's integrity. But if you think about it, Rob, once you identify that word, then your whole life and career is building that mosaic to that word. And I think that that's what's so important. Yeah. And the decisions that you make, for me, was thoughtful. I thought about how it impacted not only our customers, but our people and our share owners. That decision on, right sizing an organization, how, look, we all understand the impact on the bottom line, but what's the impact on people? And then if we have to do it, what's the right way to do it? What's the proper way to do it? If it's something we have no choice but to do, we do have a choice in how we conduct ourselves. We do have a choice in the way we communicate these things to our people. So I think that that's what's so important. So if you can pick that word that describes you at the end of your career, what you're really doing then is building that mosaic throughout your career so that is the word that, when people talk about Rocky Romanella, hopefully they'll say, yeah, you know what? Had his moments, but you know what? A thoughtful guy.
There you go. And it's just like what I read is a humble Italian charm and an innate charisma. True storyteller. I love it.
Thank you very much. It's funny. I'll tell you
I love it. It's true.
Well,
it's so true.
When people read the book, there'll be some great stories. I think there's some good greats. You can't say great. That means you think they are great. No, I hope you'll enjoy those. I hope you'll enjoy the book. But in my early growing up, my dad, as we talked, and he told me the things that we spoke about. But my wife Debbie has the number one story in my adult business life. So we're sitting there one day.
What was that?
So she's the social one in the family, because we moved so many times. I would say to her, why are we meeting anybody and making friends? Because now we're going to say goodbye and then you're going to be sad. No. We're gonna make friends. So you go to church and do the handshake. Right. I'm not sure you get allowed to do it anymore, but do the handshake piece. We meet this couple, go out to dinner or whatever. And then the wife, looks at Debbie and says, we have 4 kids. She says, so, hey, which one of your kids is your favorite? And Debbie says, I don't have any favorites, right? So I kind of lean back. I want to hear how she handles it. I want to hear the answer to this. Is it Jean Marie, Nicole, Rocky, Angela? I got to tell, and I want to tell them. I'm the first one to tell them, hey, Mommy said who the favorite is. So she says, no.
Yeah.
And goes, how could that be? She goes, listen, they're all my favorite because each of them gets what they need when they need it. And I thought to myself, that is such a brilliant, thoughtful. It's her. And from that moment forward, that's how I manage. Each person gets what they need when they need it. And you think about me. I mean, if I'm managing this organization, if I have a controller, he or she is very good at their job, very seasoned, they don't need me to overmanage them. So me not spending as much time with them doesn't make them feel like they're left out. In fact, they feel good about the fact that I trust them enough to let them do their job. So those are conversations. Then I have a new, maybe director of sales. He or she needs me to spend time with them, maybe to go out with them and close a deal. Well, they need a different amount of time from me. And so they feel good about the fact that I'm spending that time with them. So from that moment forward, I really thought about, as I managed, as I led, that each person should get what they need when they need it, and therefore they all feel like they're the favorites. And to me, that was such an impactful lesson for me. And I always tell her all the time, I mean, that was the greatest lesson I learned, through my leadership, was to give each person what they need when they need it. And you think about it as you're managing, a fire station, right? Everybody in that fire station has different skill levels at different times, based on their experience, based on the things they've been through, in some cases based on what's going on outside of in their personal lives, maybe. And that's the ultimate, right? Think about that. I mean, you know it better than I do, but that's the ultimate team experience. I mean, the harmony with which you fight a fire, I think people lose sight of the fact, how synchronized that whole process is. your lives depend on each other.
Yeah.
And so for me,
Right. And it's not just our lives, it's others. It's a fine dance, and you put it perfectly, is that there's a lot of different things and different factors that go into employees or, a team, and making sure that all those little aspects. Your wife is a very smart individual.
I tell them, hey,
you have to tell her that.
All the time. Hey, look, I married up, man. It's as simple as it gets. I got lucky here.
Me too. I love it. Well, Rocky, it's such a pleasure to be able to talk to you. You are a great individual, and I love what you do. You can either go to 60managementservices.com or tightenthelugnut's.com and find this great book. And I'm sure people will enjoy every single story within that. I always end the same way on all my podcasts. I have 3 questions that I'll ask you, and then we'll have a rapid round. I don't give them to you ahead of time because I love to make people sweat a little bit. All right, here we go. Here's the first one. What is one thing you haven't done but is outside of your comfort zone?
Outside of my comfort zone. That's an interesting one. I don't. You got me sweating here. I haven't done this outside of my comfort zone.
That's what it's all about.
Here, she say, "Eat food that's not Italian." I can't. We go to these restaurants. I move the food around all the time. I'm like, really, hon? Yeah, I would say it. Yeah, outside of my food that's Italian. Yeah.
I like that one. That one. That is a comfort zone.
Go on vacation every now and then. I guess when you go to different countries, she's like, "We're going to try this." I'm like, "They don't have pizza here." Everybody has pizza, I think.
I like that one. That's the most unique one I've gotten.
Well, if she was standing here, she would say, "All
right, here's your second.
I'll tell you that.
Make them have another one. All right, here's your second question. What's your favorite quote and why?
And why? I would say it's a little bit more than a quote, but it's from Coach John Wooden, and it's on competitive greatness, which is competitive greatness is being your best when your best is needed. Oh yeah, hey. I got to tell you that story at the end. Remind me to just tell you that Wooden one real quick before we go. But yeah. So
tell me it right now.
2000, I was working for UPS, and we had this management conference, and so each of us got assigned a task, and we were looking for someone to speak on leadership. And so I had just seen Coach Wooden speak in those days. It was the Anaheim Pond. I was out in California, and I said, I think Coach Wooden would be a great speaker for us. They said, well, good luck. See if you can get him. So I'm in California. I called the UCLA athletic department and get the assistant athletic director, tell them what I'm wanting to do. And they go, look, I think Coach Wooden might talk to you. So here's his phone number. So they give me Coach Wooden's phone number, and they said, look, don't call him. Just send him your proposal and then wait a week or two and then call him. So I sent my proposal, what I was hoping for. And then, of course, I wait 2 weeks, and I called Coach Wooden, left him, and they said, he won't answer the phone. He'll go into the answering machine, and then he'll call you if he wants to. So I do all that. A couple of weeks go by, I haven't heard from him. At UPS said, hey, look, this is a great idea, but if you don't hear from Coach Wooden soon, we got to move on. So I called one more time. I said, Coach Wooden, Rocky Romanella, I'd love to talk to you. I said, Coach, look, I got all, and I went through the pyramid with him on the phone. I all the hard work, enthusiasm. I said, well, look, Coach, I got 4 kids. I really need your help. And I hung up, right? So I go to the hockey rink with my son Rocky, who's playing hockey at the time, and my daughter Jimmy goes, Dad, some guy called you, John Wooden. I go, oh, give me the number. So I call him back. And he says to me, yeah, I'd love to help you out. He said, I want you to come to my condo. I spent 4 hours in his condo in Westwood. And amazing, right? And the guy, well, of course he sits back, but the most amazing person I spent time with. And he was great. I mean, it was just a great guy. And in fact, on my website under Coach's Corner, there's an hour interview I did with him that's there. And you can see Coach Wooden, and he's sitting there. He's such a gentleman. And he told such great stories, but, such a thoughtful leader. And the thing that impressed me the most is I said to him at the end, I said, hey, Coach, UPS, whatever you want for your fee. He goes, what do you mean fee? I said, look, we respect your time and we understand you're a prominent speaker. He goes, look, you asked me to do you a favor. Absolutely not. You don't need to pay me anything. I said, oh, Coach, he looked at me and he goes, well, look, he said, would you make a donation to the Jimmy V Foundation? I said, absolutely. So we made it, I think it was $10,000 pound, but never once it was
Wow.
ever about him. And so now every book sold for Tighten the Lug Nuts, we donate $1 to the Jimmy V Foundation because I was so moved by Coach Wooden. You know, he was so humble, but that was yeah. So if you want to see the Coach Wooden interview, it's on my website, W360 Management Services Coach's Corner, and it's I and Coach Wooden in 2000 speaking. But it was one of the greatest moments. He was everything that we thought he was and read about.
That's amazing. That's definitely something to go to, and donating to the Jimmy V Foundation is unbelievable. So definitely everybody should go to Tighten the Lug Nuts and .com and buy a book because that foundation is unbelievable. All right, here's your next question. You ready? All right, it's if you could pick to have coffee with 3 other people, they can be deceased or alive, at a firehouse table, who would it be and why? And so at a firehouse table, there's nothing off the board.
Well,
you can ask any questions.
Be George Washington. I would ask him, like, how did you motivate those people? Like, what did you like when you weren't paying them and they had no shoes and stuff? How do you keep on fighting? You know, so I would absolutely. And I went to school, like I said, to be a high school history teacher, so I love the history side of it. Interesting enough, after this whole Grant presentation, I would love to have a conversation with General Grant. I mean, the guy up and down, all around, what he went through. And then I would think that, you know, the third one for me, you know, I always feel like, you know, when you look at, you know, would be someone, you know, that I think makes a difference in everyone's life. And I think that for me, it would have been, you know, someone who came across on, you know, a journey or those kinds of things. And so you know, you think about history, but I'm looking at for that individual person. So, you know, I remember saying, so it would have been my grandmother, now that I understand everything that they went through. My dad came over when he was 14. They were on a ship for 30 days, 4 of them. And I never really asked her those questions. And so I would love to talk to my grandmother and just say to her, so like and my grandfather was here in the States almost 10 years ahead of them, trying to make a living, sending money back, raising my dad, my uncle, and my aunt. So I would love to have talked to my grandmother now, knowing all those things. I mean, so that would be for me the third person. Hey, what were you thinking? What was going on? How did that, you know, what were you thinking there? You know what I mean? And 30 days, because it's funny, my dad never really talked about the days on the ship. My aunt, he's passed, my uncle's passed, my Aunt Vicky's still alive. But what happened on those days? What, you know what I mean? It's like, it's hard for us to fathom today because of how quickly you can get. So I would talk to her. Right. So I just wanted to set it up a little bit because it's not as prominent as, you know, George Washington or Grant, but I always thought about, boy, now that I would love to ask her different questions, not as the grandson growing up with her, but more of what took place.
Yeah, yeah. Oh my gosh, that'd be a great table. She'd probably get, you know, she'd probably be the dominant voice, though, I'm guessing.
One of us got stupid, she'd look at us, hey. In her own way, she always got order back together again. I don't know how they did it these days. They had a way to do that for you. They got, okay, don't get too excited about who you are. Just sit down there. Okay, sorry, no. You know, it's like, okay, I got it. You're in charge.
I know you're George. George Washington.
Yeah. It wasn't your turn. You didn't go and talk there. And how do you think he feels now that you interrupted him? Okay, sorry. You know, we're all looking at our feet like we're back in Catholic school. Don't call on me. You know, it's one of those things. You know? Maybe she won't notice me if I'm looking at my feet.
I love it.
Nah, it doesn't work that way.
It doesn't work that way. I love it. All right, you've made it all the way to the rapid round. Here's where I give you 2 things. All you got to do is choose one of them. All right, here we go. Paper or plastic?
Say paper. Oh, definitely salad.
Super salad. McDonald's or Taco Bell?
McDonald's.
There you go.
Hotel.
Camping or a hotel?
Yeah.
I totally agree with you. Fly or drive? Oh, I thought the UPS guy would have said drive.
Wake up early.
Sleep in late or wake up early?
Run.
Run or walk? How about
Sunny.
partly sunny or partly cloudy? Fire or water? Be careful, you know who you're talking to.
I don't want to put my friend in harm's way, so I would say water.
There you go. How about use a porta potty or continue to run or drive to the next physical bathroom?
It's a mental thing. It's from all those years. Right? You tell kids,
I love it.
Next, like that was like 4 hours ago. Yeah, it's a mental thing. You trained yourself, so that's why. Yeah,
exactly. You train it.
I'm not
all right, Coke or Pepsi?
Coke. Oh, you gotta go big.
All right, go big or go home. All right. Hey, Rocky, it's been such a pleasure to have you on the show today. If you want to find out more, you can go to 60managementservices.com or go to tightenthelugnut's.com and get your book today. Rocky, thank you so much for coming on today.
If I can ever help in any way, please don't hesitate to let me know, and be safe out there. And thank you for all you do. Thank you for your service, sir.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Rocky. And thanks for listening today, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks for listening and supporting the Forged in the Fires podcast with Fireman Rob. Remember, don't forget to like and subscribe to this podcast, and please share this episode with a friend or family. To find out more about Fireman Rob or reach out about a question, go to www.firemanrob.com. Until next time, live your life forged in the fires.